from Studio 13 in California, you're listening to Wildcard with your hosts, John.
Connor is requesting that I ask this question: how frequently per week did you play shirtless volleyball?
And Connor.
I want to set the Top Gun over-under for this interview at, I'm going to say, 15 references.
A show that is the equivalent of lukewarm airplane food.
Hello, and welcome to this episode of Wildcard. This is quite the eclectic show today. It starts off on the heavier side as I remember the passing of my longtime dog and one of my best friends, Molly. After that, I wipe off my tears and suck it up because we invite to the show one of the most badass guests we've ever had. It's naval aviator, former Lieutenant Commander Ben Horn. Ben talks all about his time flying fighter jets, F-18 Super Hornets, in combat over Iraq and Afghanistan. Like the time he had to make an emergency landing because his plane rapidly depressurized and he couldn't talk, and he got the bends. Or there's the time that he landed his jet on an aircraft carrier, which, if not hard enough, in a sandstorm when you couldn't see. So if you happen to see a MiG-28 do a -4-degree dive, it's time to get inverted and keep up foreign relations for this episode of Wildcard. I like to keep the show kind of fun. People have hard lives, and I like to keep the show kind of fun and keep it interesting. But every once in a while, there are aspects that I just kind of have to be honest about, and they're not necessarily that fun. And this will be probably a little bit of a heavier moment for me. I think you know a little bit about what I'm talking about, which is I had a dog, Molly, who I had for 13 years. And this past week, actually no more than a few days ago, Molly died at 13 years and change. And I think that it felt disingenuous to come on here. And look, when your dog dies, it doesn't mean that you can't laugh and you can't enjoy parts of life, because I found that humor is very much a bedfellow of pain. Sometimes the way that you break the monotony of feeling like shit is to have a good laugh. But I also didn't want to come on here and just act like everything was fun and zany, because it hurts a lot to lose a pet. And I think anyone out there that has lost an animal can relate to what that feels like, and kind of the hollowness and the emptiness that it feels. The house doesn't feel whole anymore. Mm-hmm. It feels like it's missing someone. And I know that you had a dog, gosh, I want to say it's going on 10 years ago, named Otter.
He died on September 23rd, 2004, so coming up on 14 years.
I've known you for a long time, and for whatever reason, whether it's because of what you dealt with growing up, just your natural personality, but I feel like you tend to put up a lot of walls. You're kind of emotionally not the most available person, and I felt like Otter cracked through that, and he was someone that at a time in your life you could really rely on. I told my daughter, and she asked me one time, what why do we have dogs? Why does a dog live with us and other animals live outside in nature and so on? And God, I'm going to try to hold it together through all of this stuff. But I said to her, I said, we made a deal with dogs a long time ago that we promised to give them food and shelter and scratch their bellies, and they promised to be there for us whenever we need them, in any capacity. I always joke that we got the better end of the deal, because you go through a lot of shit in your life, and no matter who you are, you have good times and you have bad times. To have a dog there, to have someone who doesn't care what you look like, doesn't care how much money you make, doesn't care if a relationship broke up because it was your fault or the other person's fault or whatever it is, they just don't give a shit. They're just there for you. Anyway, I know that Otter, still 14 years later, I mean, you've never gotten another pet.
There's one thing in particular that sounded very familiar, which was the feeling that the house was empty. I remember feeling that very distinctly. I didn't have friends growing up. I don't really have friends now. But, when you're a kid, it's a little bit harder because at least now I'm used to not having friends. As a kid, I had Otter, and I am the type of person who likes dogs more than people. And I'm not saying that to exaggerate. I kind of mean it. To this day, my company is named after him. My email address is his name. There's a picture of him above my computer in my office. I have dreams about him very frequently. And yeah, I haven't gotten another dog, so I'm that kind of creepy guy. I'm the creepy guy who will walk up to a dog, if someone's walking the dog down the sidewalk, and I just start petting the dog and talking to it and hanging out with it, and then the person will start wanting to talk to me, and I'm like, get away from me, you weirdo. I'm not talking to you, I'm talking to the dog. They'll be like, oh, what's your name? Like, get out of here. I am talking to the dog. But yeah, I haven't gotten another pet since Otter. My boyfriend and I are now talking about it, and I do actually think it might be a good idea, but I don't know. That's going to be hard for me.
I literally had someone today who was kind of giving me their condolences say, it's one of the reasons that we haven't gotten another dog, because they had a dog pass away, I think a couple years ago. They said, I'm not ready to sign up for that hurt again. Yeah.
You and I had this conversation. I remember you quoted Good Will Hunting to me, because this was shortly after Otter died, and you said, are you going to get another dog? And I said, my dog is dead, which is a line that Robin Williams says in Good Will Hunting. It's hard. It's tough. It's like you bring a kid into your life knowing that the life expectancy is only 10 or 15 years. And we were talking about getting a Great Dane, and those guys only make it 7 or 8 years, on a good day. So that's tough.
What this has kind of brought back to the top of my mind, the moment you have kids, somebody just stomps on the accelerator of life. The days are long, but the years are short, and it just flies by. You only have a short number of days when your kid is young. You only have a short number of days when your kid, is a teenager. There will be a last day that you read a bedtime story, and then they grow out of it, and they don't need that bedtime story anymore. You have a crap day, and you're tired and you're stressed, and all you want to do is crawl in bed and watch some terrible reality TV show, and you don't want to read a book to your kid. But there'll be a day that you wish and want and hope more than anything to read a book to your kid, because they're too old for it now. And that's a really long way of saying that it's kind of resetting me to not take the little things for granted. That we are so, time marches forward so unrelentingly that it's causing me to just take a little bit more time with the day-to-day stuff and find the joy in the here and now. Because if you don't enjoy life as it's happening, that's all there is. That is absolutely all there is on this earth, is the joy and love and happiness that you can get out of this moment right now. Because as cliche as it is, the past is gone and the future isn't here yet. And so all you've got is now. If there's anything that I can take, enjoy life as it's happening, enjoy the small things, because life is painfully, painfully short.
Do you know who Warren Zevon was? Warren Zevon, this must have been, it's almost 10 years ago now. I think he had terminal cancer. Whatever it was terminal. And I think he had made it public. And he went on Dave Letterman. Letterman asked him essentially, what are your words of wisdom? And Zevon said, enjoy every sandwich. I think he only made it like a couple months after that. But I've always loved that quote. Yep. Just enjoy every sandwich. Chase every tennis ball.
Yeah, I had never heard that story before. I really like that. I think it's concise and honest and wise, and I like that. Anyway, so I will end with this, and then we'll take a quick break, and hopefully I can put on a smile face, and we'll talk about some cool fighter pilot stuff.
Well, don't worry, because I'm super funny, and I turned it up to 11 today. 'Cause I can tell that you're down, and our listeners demand and expect comedy from this show. So I'm going to have some zingers.
Well, I've been disappointed in the past, so this is just like life for my wife. Another evening of disappointment.
Well, the truth is, we get like one funny line per hour episode, and usually it's from me anyway. So I just have to bat average today.
Good Lord. Okay. I think Ben is up any second. So let's take a quick break, and then we will be back with Lieutenant Commander Ben Horn.
Wildcard is brought to you by
Coinbot. Access cryptocurrency pricing and market information right in your Slack or Telegram group. To add Coinbot for free to your group today, please visit coinbot.co. One more quick thing before we get back to the show. If you enjoy any Wildcard episodes, then go ahead and tell a friend. I know it may not seem like it, but this kind of drivel actually takes a lot of time and effort to cut together and to put out. So if you could share it with someone, help us grow. Also, please, 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 go to iTunes, take less than a minute to review the show. Just write up a few quick sentences, submit it. This is how people are going to find the show. Anyway, tell a friend, tell a neighbor, write a review. Can you say, hello, you're listening to Wildcard?
Hello, you're listening to Wild Card.
Hello, welcome back to the show. Let's go ahead and try this again. Because I am a moron, when we came back from break, I forgot to hit record when we started our interview with Ben. So let's try this again. Connor is about to murder me, but thankfully we didn't get very far into it. So Ben, thank you for being a good sport. Thank you for sticking around. Let's do this again.
You were great, by the way, Ben. You're doing great.
Are you sure? I'm worried.
Yeah, we might as well make a joke out of it.
Let's just jump off where we are.
For the love of God, let's at least introduce the guy. So Ben Horn, a former lieutenant commander in the Navy and aviator. So Ben, thank you for still being with us on this super professional, classy show.
Guys, thanks for having me. I'm honestly just happy to be here. And what is it that they say? I think it's 4 steps backwards, 1 step forward. And let me tell you one thing, John, about that error. When I was, I got to fly a few missions in country over Afghanistan, and it was very serious. If we didn't turn our tapes on and we released ordnance, that A, it either didn't happen and they wouldn't believe you, or B, you just royally screwed up. It was part of our checklist, but maybe I can write you a checklist so that doesn't happen.
I was about to feel good about
so easy a monkey could do it.
I was about to feel good about myself because he was going to tell me that he had not turned on his tapes and dropped bombs on Afghanistan.
He's a professional.
No, he is just making fun of how shitty I am.
Yes, and by the way, most people do have checklists. And if you're recording something for audio, probably push record is high on that checklist.
I am fairly mortified.
It's very, very happy to be here. I'm honored to be here. Thank you.
Well, thank you again for joining us. And
the most patient guest ever.
Oh my God. Where we left off, we had talked a little bit about your time in kind of just starting to get to fly. And we talked about rivalries that exist. We talked a little bit about Captain Phil, who had said that the coolest job on earth is to be, or at least in the military, is to be an aviator because you have this support structure around you. You get square meals.
Well, so the funny thing is, Captain Phil was kind of complimenting Ben and Ben's peers, but it was a little bit of a backhanded insult because, to use Captain Phil's words, he's like, well, best job in the military, probably being a fighter pilot because you think about the infrastructure that goes into helping somebody be a pilot. They're gonna need to have a place to sleep, a place to nutrition. Somebody's gonna have to be laundering their attire. And so all of those are good things. We didn't have that. So I think basically what Phil was saying is that fighter pilots are kind of soft.
Look, I'm not going to argue with Captain Phil Downs, right? What those guys do, I have the utmost respect for what those guys do, putting boots on the ground. I never had to deal with one night in a country that I didn't grow up in, stepping foot there in a combat situation. We'd fly our missions and get to fly back to the ship. And then all of a sudden we'd be hanging out, having midnight rations, just kind of smoking and joking, if you will, with our buddies once the flying was done for that day. And we didn't have to deal with any mortar attacks that night or anything like that. So, yeah, if you want to call the fighter pilot soft, Phil Downs, that sounds good. And from the East Coast, I will probably send you a snippy email, and that will be all.
Be careful messing with Phil because he drives around in rental cars with 50 cals in the back, allegedly.
And don't try to give him any fettuccine Alfredo. He really dislikes fettuccine Alfredo.
So what plane did you fly, and can you tell us a bit about its specs?
Yeah, I flew the F-18 Super Hornet for my operational tour, and then I instructed in both the F-18 Legacy Hornet and the Super Hornet. So just basically F-18s, the older variant and the newer variants. The one that I flew operationally was a single-seat aircraft. So did not have a goose in the back seat as you said.
Is that our first Top Gun reference for the day?
Because I was inverted.
Ding. So yeah, no
But
goose.
Connor is requesting that I ask this question: how frequently per week did you play shirtless volleyball?
Well, let's see. In flight school, where it all began for every naval aviator, Pensacola, Florida, the armpit of naval aviation.
Sounds nice.
You know, funny enough, we actually got really into beach volleyball.
Please tell me you're kidding, or are you being serious right now?
No, I am dead serious. Almost all day long, Saturday and Sunday. It was just an awesome way. You could kind of day drink and then sweat it out, and it was like a net neutral.
That makes sense.
It was awesome.
That sounds sciencey. Did you have a boombox next to the court that just played a tape of Everybody's Playing with the Boys on repeat?
That's ridiculous, Connor. Why would you even say that?
That would be strange. That would be downright strange.
Do you wear your dog tags while playing shirtless volleyball, glistening with the perfect amount of sweat?
I wish I could say we did, but no, it stopped at playing beach volleyball. Okay.
and I should say here, I think that was the first and second Top Gun reference that we've had now on tape. And I want to set the Top Gun over under for this interview at, I'm going to say 15 references, and my semen jokes at 4.
Moving on. So one of the questions I had, and we talked a little bit about it, in your training, what kind of X-Men laboratory do you guys go into? What kind of strange tests do they do on you guys?
Yeah, step one, they take a lot of measurements. I had some friends who were disqualified from flying an ejection seat aircraft because their torso, not even their overall length, just their torso length was, an inch too long. So measurements is probably one of the big ones. And then probably the centrifuge stands out, right? So the centrifuge is where they're going to spin you so you can see how your body withstands G's and figure out kind of your G tolerance.
That's the thing in like Apollo 13 and every space movie where your face is flapping back behind your ears and the guy just has the look on his face like, why are they doing this to me?
Yeah, that's right. And then when people kind of lose control of their breath and maybe they're going to pass out, they kind of do the funky chicken because their brain is basically cut off from oxygen and they kind of flailing. And it's pretty funny if you Google it.
Can you tell us there's like a Lamaze strategy, right, for the high G breathing?
Yeah, the Hick maneuver, and it's kind of all about maintaining a positive pressure in your lungs and not kind of allowing your lungs to collapse in between breaths. So it's if you can get me on audio here, it's kind of this is what it sounds like. So and in that, that's my exhale and inhale almost simultaneously and not allowing my lungs to kind of equilibrate.
Wait, is it just kind of like maintaining a ton of pressure? Is it trying to keep your blood pressure up? Is that what it does?
Yeah, I think that's what it's doing, or your cardiovascular tone and keeping the blood up there. Often in the F-18, we'll go from, call it 450 knots down to, say, 200 knots, and it will take about 8 seconds, let's say, under a certain amount of G's.
How does one do that? Are you deploying flaps? Are you going into a climb? When would you do this breathing?
So basically, you're doing it when you're pulling a high amount of G and you have a large amount of airspeed on the jet. So you have a lot of G available, basically airspeed. You're going fast. You're going fast as hell, and you're about to bleed a lot of airspeed. How are you doing that? You're just pulling back on the stick, and you're pulling a lot of G's.
And what would you do that maneuver for?
Yeah, it could be an evasive. It's basically in a dogfighting situation. So you're in a visual fight within the visual arena, and you're fighting each other. You're in air combat maneuvering, you're dogfighting 1v1 or however many jets there are. And you are either trying to gain an offensive or you're trying to shake the guy at your 6 o'clock.
And if you screw up the breathing technique while you're flying, I mean, you could just pass out in the cockpit, right? And you're in a 1-seat plane. What happens then?
Yeah, nothing good. I mean, there's two things that are going to happen if you screw up the breathing. One, you're either going to let go of the stick, which is going to give your adversary a huge advantage because you're not max performing your aircraft. Or two, you won't let go of the stick and you'll pass out. And, depending on altitude, you're just hoping you wake up and recover the jet before you hit the ground.
Have you ever seen that happen to anyone in training or anything like that?
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, how frequent was that, and what was the outcome?
in my 12 years of flying F-18s, from an actual over G where the person pulled too many Gs, maybe it happened 4 times, and it was catastrophic and all loss of life and all the accidents.
Oh
Wow.
my gosh!
So
that is no joke.
They figured out.
They're actually talking about coming out with the technology, and so this is the deal. The technology exists where if the jet senses that it's like in a free fall, it's going to come out with like more alarms and can actually auto recover itself.
That's what I was going to ask too.
Yeah.
However, the Department of Defense just hasn't paid up for it, and it's not in the jets.
That's
so,
weird because our defense budget is so small and reasonable.
Yes. I feel like one tweet to Elon Musk and we'd have this by Thursday.
Kind of reminds me of when Phil was like, yeah, we got to Iraq and we started putting sandbags next to the door in our Humvees.
Yeah.
Thanks, Rumsfeld.
In one of our episodes, Phil was talking about how he ran up on actually some naval welders that were just kind of sitting around with all this steel to armor all of the Humvees, but they had not received the proper forms from their higher-ups
report
to weld the steel into the doors of the Humvee. Yeah. And Phil's like, I'm going to go ahead and need you to just weld that fucking steel in my truck.
So, there's a lot of good ideas out there for jets, and I'm sure for Phil's Humvees as well, but it's just whether or not the DoD can adopt it and kind of fund it.
But speaking of technology, the F-18 was designed, 30 years ago?
Yeah, so the legacy F-18 was probably designed in the 70s, and the Super Hornet in the 90s.
And so what's the new invisible plane that we don't even know about? Is there one?
Kill you.
I'm sure there is one that we don't know about. What's hitting the streets now is the F-35 Joint Strike Fighter, which will be in the Navy, the Air Force, and in the Marine Corps. And it's starting to hit Navy squadrons, Air Force squadrons, and Marine Corps squadrons as well. I have friends that fly it. And it's starting to come online, and they really do say it's a game changer. It's an amazing aircraft. But yeah, there were a lot of issues with its development.
So you never flew one?
I did not, unfortunately.
It seems kind of crazy to me that you guys were flying around in like a 1976 Camaro. Like 40 years is a freaking long time, especially in transportation technology.
Yeah, they're constantly updating the software in the jet almost every year. So we were getting upgrades, and I am by no means saying that what I was flying was old. I got to fly my operational tour, the newest Super Hornets to hit the Navy. They had that new car smell right off the Boeing flight line in Seattle and St. Louis, and it was amazing. The technology was awesome, but yeah, the DoD just can't innovate at Elon Musk's timeline.
Well, sure, and airplanes have a much longer design cycle because if a car breaks down, it rolls off the side of the road. If a jet, even a passenger plane or a fighter jet breaks down, it's a much, much bigger problem. But one of the things there, you're talking about that the chances of passing out were in evasive maneuvers and dogfighting. And are we getting into plane-to-plane dogfights anymore, or has kind of the typical mission changed?
Well, we're designing jets that hopefully you don't find yourself there, but we always come back to in our tactics and our training that, if the flag goes up with some of these other countries, call it China, just for example, you'll just be inundated. And all of a sudden you will be nose to nose in the visual arena, and you'll have to know how to dogfight your jet. It's kind of the blocking and tackling, if you will.
Are any other countries developing planes that are more advanced than ours? Are we worried that the Chinese are beating us to the punch?
I honestly can't speak to that, but I think the answer is yes. And it just forces, you can think of it like an arms race. It forces each country to continue to develop that next generation fighter. So yes, in short.
How many countries have the capability to actually bring one of our jets down? When
I was flying, I deployed in 2011 and 2012, and then I instructed for 5 years. So there's a pretty big gap there since I've deployed. When I deployed, it was to Afghanistan or Iraq, and we had total air superiority. We did launch with some air-to-air missiles. However, we were never worried about that. We had air-to-air superiority in Afghanistan. All we were worried about is, possibly something coming up from surface-to-air, a surface-to-air threat. However, today it's very different. I know the Navy's flying over Syria almost on a daily basis, or at least they were when I was kind of last plugged in. And that place was kind of crazy to think about. You had Russia there. You had Syria, obviously, flying overhead. And you had these, at least 3 different countries flying overhead, and if tensions did escalate, you could find yourself in an air-to-air war when the Navy hasn't shot down an aircraft since 1991 at the time.
Wow.
Actually, that changed a couple years ago with a naval aviator taking down I believe it was a Syrian jet.
Well, and if, let's say you're flying a combat mission into hostile Russia or hostile North Korea, what capacity do they have to take you down?
Yeah, integrated air defense system, IADS. They have surface-to-air threats everywhere, basically. It would be a total...
And those are a legitimate danger?
Yeah, and a lot of it's Russian technology or nowadays Chinese technology, and they are a very legitimate danger, yeah.
What is the biggest threat? What are you worried about when you're sent out on a mission?
When I went out, I would say maybe just a maintenance malfunction if I lose my engines. Could we see a surface-to-air threat? Yeah, if we were down low, maybe an RPG or but all that was just ballistic. To our knowledge, they didn't have any IR or radar guided missiles that I was worried about. So it's kind of like somebody throwing a pebble at like a hummingbird or whatever flying by. So I wasn't too worried about that.
If you can hit an F-18 with an RPG, kudos to you, sir. That is the miracle shot.
Promotion.
Yeah, seriously. You just became the general.
How common? I think today though they are worried about more because Syria has surface-to-air threats and there are air-to-air threats as well. So I think it's a little bit different than when I last deployed. So
how common are maintenance malfunctions on a 30 or 40-year-old fighter jet?
John, I don't know if you know this, but the Americans were making some super reliable transportation in the 1970s.
I take everything I said back.
So, I mean, it's pretty common to be honest, but
wow.
Once they were up and working though, say everything started normally on the deck of the aircraft carrier or on land, statistically you're going to be okay. But that's not to say that issues don't happen. There's physiological episodes where maybe the oxygen system could have contaminants in it. They're actually seeing an increase in that in the last couple of years in the F-18. And then, possibly some engine issues as well. When I was flying, I had a couple maintenance issues. I got to say, flying an F-18 versus a helicopter, you were talking about that earlier. I always put a lot of stock in knowing that I had an ejection seat underneath me.
You can't eject into a rotor blade, Connor. It doesn't work so well.
I thought they did have choppers with ejection seats.
Wasn't there some jet years ago that had an ejection seat that ejected you down, which is fine if you're 30,000 feet in the air, but if you take off and stuff goes wrong when you're really close to the ground, it essentially fires you into the ground like a lawn dart. And they actually trained pilots to, if something went wrong, just go ahead and flip your aircraft, just do a nice little half roll and eject yourself upside down.
This sounds made up. Ben?
I think there is an aircraft where I think it was like a 3-crew aircraft, and I think the third person, I think he was going to be ejected downward through the floorboards. Don't quote me.
I'm calling shotgun in that plane. I am not sitting in the back.
Seriously, talking about the back seat being called bitch.
Yeah, there will be some fights for that one.
I'm sorry, Kevin. You'll be taking lawn dart position for this flight.
Oh, don't worry, Kevin. We're totally going to flip it over before we eject.
Did you ever have anything in the air that was pretty scary?
I was doing a flyover, actually, a good deal weekend flyover of a football game, University of Kentucky versus the South Carolina Gamecocks a couple years ago.
Go Gamecocks.
Coming home on a Sunday evening from Lexington, Kentucky to Virginia Beach. We were up at 27,000 feet, which is just high enough where you can kind of leave your mask off and you can breathe ambient cockpit air of 10,000 feet cabin pressure or less. So you got your mask off. We're going pretty fast to get home. And I get the deedle, kind of the little emergency tone. My jet sensed an overheat in the bleed air system. So the jet takes bleed air from the engine, so very high pressure air, to do certain things, provide you oxygen, give your G suit that inflatable G tolerance that you referenced, cabin pressurization as well. So immediately my jet shut down the bleed air system. So I went from 8,000 foot cabin pressure to roughly 27,000 feet, almost instantaneously. So that's kind of that rapid decompression.
Wow. Did it blow out your eardrums or anything like that?
could have, it didn't. So immediately, like, I'm the flight lead. I've got 2 wingmen on my side, 2 of my buddies, and they're in their jets. And I can't talk because the pressurization now in the cockpit is so intense that I can't talk anymore. And I know that I need to immediately descend. So I put my mask on. I pull the emergency oxygen handle. So now I have 100% oxygen delivered straight to my mask. So I know that that's good. At least I'm breathing now more concentrated oxygen.
You're breathing old lady at the slot machine air.
I mean, it was kind of smelly, but I was thankful for it. And I start downhill. I have to get down immediately to a lower altitude so that my cabin pressure gets back down to normal. So I just start descending, and the FAA frowns upon that, but luckily I've got a really nice radar, so I knew that the Southwest out of Cleveland wasn't right beneath me, and start descending, get down to 10,000 feet roughly, and just hope that my buddies are talking to the FAA for me, which, you're trained. They started talking to them immediately probably. And we get back to Virginia Beach. We kind of limp our way home, pass up Richmond, Virginia, thinking that we're good to go to get back to Virginia Beach. So we get home, we land kind of uneventfully, and then I get out of the aircraft and my elbow kind of hurts, and I'm talking to another one of my buddies who had to come in on a Sunday just to catch us with our weekend boondoggle flyover. So he was probably pissed off, but he's like, "Hey, have you thought about that you might have experienced a rapid decompression and you could have, basically the bends." I told him my elbow hurt, right? So it's
that's
joint.
not good. Yeah, joint.
They got to get you into the pressure chamber,
yes.
right?
Yeah, that's right. So it's like Sunday night, and I'm like, man, my wife is flying home from Kentucky. I got to pick her up. And then I'm like, yep, you're probably right. I don't want to die tonight. I don't want to have that air bubble go to my brain or whatever.
So for people that aren't divers, explain what the bends is and why you need to be in a decompression chamber. So
basically, nitrogen or oxygen or some other type of gas could have then entered my bloodstream. Basically, it was under an extreme pressure, and it could have pushed it into my blood, is the way I understand it, and into solution. So now that those air bubbles or nitrogen bubbles or whatever can now travel, possibly cross the blood-brain border, and at the very least could give you some really bad joint pain, and then down the road you could have neurological effects as well. So
and a heart attack, because if you get a big enough air bubble passed through your heart doesn't pumps don't pump air very well. They pump fluid, and you'll actually, you can drop dead from the bends if you get one of those air bubbles, air pockets through your heart. So that is terrifying.
Yeah, so I kind of go down that route. We call the flight surgeon in. They hook me up to some oxygen, and then it's like, well, where do we take this guy? It's Sunday night. What do we do?
But do they have a decompression chamber?
Yeah, that seems like a thing you would have.
That is not a common. Those things are not common.
Yeah, they didn't have it right at Virginia Beach, but or at our air station. However, the Navy SEALs and the Navy divers are right in town. So I was able to go up to a Navy diver, Navy SEAL base, and they had it. And they called in the Navy dive team of physiologists. And I ended up spending about 6 hours in a pressure chamber where they take you kind of way down deep, and then they bring you back up slowly, making sure those gas bubbles, do what they need to do and do not enter your bloodstream or into solution. So, and one interesting thing about that is they don't let you sleep during that time. So it's like the middle of the night, not a big deal. We've all pulled an all-nighter, but they're in there with me, and I feel like I was in a propane tank. It was just real small. And they're watching my eyes, and they don't let me fall asleep. So they're kind of like pinching me, hitting me if I'm falling asleep or whatever, talking to me the whole time. Because I guess if you are getting too much oxygen or something like that, then your eyelids will start to flutter, and that's the first way they know to kind of like tone back the oxygen that they're spitting in there. So all these lessons the Navy has they're probably written in blood, but I was very thankful to have kind of treated it conservatively, because who knows if that elbow pain was me banging my elbow on the cockpit or it was an actual decompression sickness, but I was just going to treat it conservatively.
So this incident happened, you were at 27,000 feet, you said. When you're flying combat missions, what type of altitudes are you running at?
Over Afghanistan, we were normally anywhere from the surface to 20,000 feet.
What would be the reason to do either?
In Afghanistan, we basically had a stack, and there were just different air assets at every altitude. The F-18 kind of just got assigned normally like 18 to 22,000 feet. However, if you're an F-18 and you need to release ordnance, or you need to maybe strafe, basically fire the gun in the jet, well, when you fire the gun, you need to get right on down to the surface with about a 1,000 foot min out.
And what is the gun on an F-18? Is it a 50 caliber?
It's a 20 millimeter cannon, HEI rounds, high explosive incendiary rounds, basically like grenade tipped 20 millimeter rounds.
Jesus.
Pretty serious stuff. And the jet shoots them out at 6,000 rounds per minute.
Oh my
roughly.
God.
6,000. And how many rounds can a jet carry?
Not very many, like about 400. So you actually only get like 2 to 3 seconds of trigger pull time until you completely depleted your entire store.
And how do you know from 1,000 feet up or even higher? How do you know what you're aiming at?
A couple different ways. Your targeting pod, which is an IR targeting pod, where you can basically infrared see what you're looking at on the ground, and the jet is then bore scope. So it's basically, if I put my little targeting cursor on, say, the driver's side window of that truck, when I put the pipper or the thing on the thing, I should be shooting that window.
So it's not something that's being lit up by someone like Phil. Like, let's say Phil's not painting something with a beacon and you're shooting at it.
Oh no, we actually absolutely have the capability and train to that. If somebody on the ground sees something, they can laze it with a laser.
Okay, that's what I was thinking.
And then our pod can pick up that energy.
Are you typically firing just dummy bombs or smart bombs?
Smart bombs. Yeah, smart bombs is really all we flew with. You could drop them as a dummy bomb, but you were probably going to be punching in coordinates or guiding them with laser energy.
So I want to pivot a bit. I feel like probably the hardest thing in aviation, maybe in the military, is landing on a freaking aircraft carrier, excuse me.
So you talked about camaraderie and whose unit is the most badass and whatnot. Well, that right there is what makes naval aviators better than any other pilot in the world.
Take that, Captain
Phil.
There it is.
In your face, Phil.
Shot across the bow.
I'll never forget the first time I went to land on an aircraft carrier. We launched off of Key West. So we launch off of Key West and we fly out maybe 30 miles. There's 4 of us in the flight. And when they send you out to the aircraft carrier for the first time, you'd think like, okay, like you're going to be with an instructor. Well, no, you're by yourself because there's no damn instructor that's crazy enough.
Oh, hell no. I wouldn't ride with anyone. So
Wait a minute. What about all the seamen all over the deck? They're just fucked? They're on their own?
The seamen are there, Connor. Don't worry, they're there. And no, you're right.
So not to derail Ben.
Sorry if I'm the only one who cares about the seamen.
Oh my God.
I still have one more in my quota.
Gay stuff.
It's funny because I'm a former race car driver, and I used to instruct race car driving. But the scariest thing is when you get a student who gets up to not quite race pace, but to the point where, mistake equals very good chance of death, that you are no longer going to ride in that car with them as they approach that limit. You're like, you are going to fly, birdie.
Yeah.
And hopefully you make it through.
Good luck to you.
Yeah, that's right. And the training, I got to give it to the Navy. We've been doing it, I think, for 110 years, naval aviation. And the training is so good that, yeah.
How do they train you for that?
So we practice a lot, obviously, on land at a normal runway. However, they have a carrier box, basically.
Oh, so super short.
With the cables.
Yeah, they just have it like painted on the runway.
And do they make you like really drunk first so that it looks like it's moving up and down, right and left?
No, but that sounds fun. So what we do is we fly what's called the meatball. It's not probably in Top Gun, and it's a series of lights that tell you. That's exactly right. You're calling the ball. So you're telling basically the ship that, yep, you can see the visual landing information. And that piece of gear, those lights, that lens on the ship or on land, which is how we train, it's telling you if you're high or low. It's not telling you left or right. To do that, you have to look out on your own and determine that.
So
However,
if I understand that correctly, it's basically, my understanding of it is you can only see that meatball when you are kind of in the correct tunnel of landing on that carrier, where if you're too high, you can't see it. If you're too low, you can't see it. Is that accurate?
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's like a 3-degree glide slope, and if you're in the window, you'll see that it's an orange ball, an orange lens, and there's a series of datums that tell you if you're on perfect glide slope, and the orange ball will be lower than those datums if you're low, and closer to the water, or if you're high, it'll be higher than the datum lights, which are green. So that tells you up and down, and you get good at flying that thing.
And you can just see that clearly out your window?
Yep, from about 3/4 of a mile, which is where you get the 3/4 of a mile, call the ball.
That's what I wanted to ask is, what if the weather is so bad that you don't have visual?
Oh, good question.
I was recovering to the ship one time in Afghanistan. It was literally, 0-0. You could not see more than, 30 feet in front of you. It was a total sandstorm.
Oh my God.
It was insane. I'll never forget it. So they tell you, hey, 99 landing lights on. That means turn your landing light on, because the LSOs will be able to pick up your landing light and then determine if you're high and low just by watching thousands and thousands of carrier landings. They kind of train their eye to know if you're high and low, because guess what? They don't have a horizon either in that situation.
Oh my God. So I just want to understand the context here. Presumably you go out on a mission, you're running out of fuel, you're over enemy territory, so it's not like you can, I'm just going to drop into Kuwait and land there.
I'm going to redirect to Dulles.
There's no visibility to the aircraft carrier, and you just have to go for it.
Yeah, pretty much. And fuel is something that you take very seriously as a naval aviator. In fact, you're directed to get back to the ship with a certain amount of fuel, which will give you a certain amount of looks at the boat. Fuel is absolutely life, and you account for every drop of it when you're a fighter pilot. So yeah, the pucker factor gets raised real quick when there's no visibility, you're low on fuel for whatever reason. And exactly like you said, you can't just divert into Oman or Yemen or anything like that.
You're basically just pulling the chute over the ocean if it doesn't work.
Yeah.
In this situation, how much fuel, how many looks did you have?
Probably 3 if you're coming back.
Oh my God.
Yeah, three looks.
When you actually land that successfully, you're just like, oh yeah, that was awesome. Or are you just petrified?
If you think you're dead, right? That's a little Top Gun quote.
That was good.
No, when you're doing it, right, you don't think about it. It's like performing as an athlete or anything like that. But yeah, when you land, I remember, because I was flying that day. Now, I will say this. The F-18 has some instruments on it that make it couple up to the ship, meaning the ship can kind of glide you in. However, people were doing that, and it wasn't helping you in that situation. Now, the one aircraft that was not able to do that was the E-2. It's kind of the radar plane, command and control airplane of the Navy. It doesn't have that capability, and it has a super big wingspan. Those guys cannot be more than a few inches left and right of center line.
Oh, God.
Is that even possible? How do you, a gust of wind, if you've got a crosswind and a boat going up and down in the sea, you could do everything right and your margin of error is more than a few inches.
Yeah.
Wow.
So that pilot that landed that E-2, first of all, I landed, my knees were shaking. Like I was taxiing back.
Oh.
And, you land on the carrier, and then these guys are trying to park you so efficiently because they have to, it's their job, but they get your nose out over the water to have you then turn. And yeah, you're going 0 miles an hour, but your knees are just shaking on the brakes, right? Because the brakes are at your toes, and you're just shaking. And I remember sometimes setting the parking brake and just
because they're inching you forward, and your job is to kind of, it's like parking.
You're basically
you're pushing the brakes, but your knees, you probably can't even feel how much pressure you're putting on the pedals because you have so much adrenaline.
You're putting the fenders over the edge of the cliff.
I remember sometimes setting the parking brake and just shaking my head no to them, like, look, I'm not going anywhere right now. Sure as hell not going any further over the edge, buddy.
Now, when you're landing on an aircraft carrier, you have to, because there's not time for the brakes to slow a jet down. I believe you have to catch a cable. And then, am I also correct in that right before you land, unlike a normal landing, you go full throttle so that if you miss the cable, you are already at full gas because there is not enough runway if you miss the cable to then throttle up and not just drive off the end of the ship.
You are 100% correct.
Oh my God.
God, that's manly.
Yeah, you don't use brakes at all. You got your hook down, and you're trying to catch one of 4 cables that run across the flight deck. Right before you touch down, just like you said, John, you go to full power because you have to assume you're going to not catch a wire. Either you went too high and you missed all the wires, you bolted, or maybe the hook skipped the wire and you just bounced over them all and you're going flying again. So it's like, yeah, that's a total head game too. You're like, okay, all that stuff, I just landed, and you're going flying again.
Oh, and I guess you know pretty quick if you caught that hook or not because your neck stretches.
Oh yeah, real quick. You're shooting forward in your seat. You've got 8 seatbelts on, and they're all restraining you, and it's a hell of a feeling.
And have you ever missed a hook? and had to go around again?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think every aviator has. As you get more experience, you do it less and less, and then just kind of stop doing it altogether. I remember one time it was a night recovery, so it's nighttime.
Oh, you do that shit at night?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
So the daytime kind of becomes, I will never say routine. It becomes very fun.
You have a twisted sense of what's
Bizarre
fun.
sense of fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, it becomes fun. The nighttime, there was a point in my career where I was probably landing at night almost every night, and it did become somewhat routine, not fun ever, but it wasn't as scary as if you're not doing it every day, then it's way more scary. And,
Yeah.
I mean, I'll never forget my first couple night traps. I mean, they were the scariest thing in the world. Maybe a little bit scarier than flying for the first time in those underpowered C-172s and what.
How often does this go wrong?
Well, you got the LSOs there, and they're going to tell you to wave off, and they're going to flash the lens bright red, and that immediately means go to full power and fly away. We've had less and less mistakes over the years behind the ship, which you make a mistake behind the ship, it could be anything, but a lot of times guys will get low and hit the back of the ship. They hit the mountain. But it's happening less and less. The training is very good.
And do they at the last second know they're going to hit and try to eject, or do they just try to fly through it, or is it just
Yeah, I mean, you've kind of seen throughout history a little bit of everything. You've seen guys kind of hit the back of the ship. The worst stuff is probably online, and you can look at it. The worst stuff, they literally break their jet in half, and then their nose is floating down the landing area, and then you see an ejection seat come out.
And if you do that as an aviator, is your career done?
Yeah, you'll go through an investigation. If it was totally your fault and there's all these other contributing factors, yeah, you'd be done. However, the Navy is in the business of retaining you and keeping you flying.
Well, they've invested a lot of money into you.
Yeah.
Would you end up flying a cargo plane full of rubber dog shit out of Hong Kong?
Nailed it.
I was practicing that one all day today. I'm so excited.
That guy who landed, the E-2 who landed in the storm, he was given a spot award. They gave him a Navy Achievement Medal, something that Captain Phil Downs probably would say no thank you to. But this this gentleman graciously accepted it. So
God, I'd accept everything possible.
Is taking off the aircraft carrier anywhere near as difficult?
No, that's just kind of like the good deal payback for landing on the carrier. That's like an awesome roller coaster ride.
That's what I was going to say. It seems like
because for a regular plane, because my dad's actually a pilot, for a regular plane takeoff, and people don't understand this. Like my wife is deathly afraid of flying, and she's always terrified on landing. And I'm like, no, you need to be terrified on the takeoff too, because that's where you're full of fuel, you're heavy, and you've got no altitude. Yeah. And so if something goes wrong, there's no runway. Whereas if you're landing and you overshoot or undershoot, assuming you have fuel, you can go around again.
Yeah, when you're taking off, we call it critical phases of flight, taking off and landing. They're both pretty dangerous.
In combat, did you ever have anyone that was down to their last landing?
It happened actually with the E-2 in that sandstorm. I think they had 2 more attempts where they did not have the fuel to make it to the divert, which was maybe 700 miles away or something. And they cannot take fuel airborne. So yeah, I think he had 2 more attempts, and it was like that's why they made such a big deal about it, because it was a big deal. It was either you get aboard in 2 attempts or you lose the aircraft, and maybe hopefully you get the crew out and they can parachute down.
You don't own that plane; the taxpayers do.
Heyo! Wow, people are, if they're doing the drinking game, they're really drunk.
I think we're up to 11 now.
Can you walk us through one of your missions? What it was like? How much they brief you? Kind of just walk us through start to finish.
Let's see. I have roughly 50 flights over Afghanistan, and we would operate from the North Arabian Sea, which is just south of Pakistan, and we'd launch from the aircraft carrier. We'd normally go in as a flight of 2, so there'd be 2 of us together, two different jets in single seat, piloted jets. We would launch from the aircraft carrier, join up overhead the ship, or maybe en route towards Pakistan. We'd fly through Pakistan.
Wait, did you just say you launched from separate carriers or from the same carrier?
Right, the same carrier.
Okay, and do you choose your wingman, or are they assigned to you?
It's just assigned to you.
Do you know them all well, or is this just some random other aviator?
Yeah, no, it's within your squadron. So in a single seat F-18 squadron, there's probably 16 people. You're going to have 2 commanders, 4 lieutenant commanders, and whatever that math is, roughly 9 or 10 lieutenants. that are kind of operating together, trained together. And that's your squadron. Those are your people. So you know them very well. You know their families, you know their wives and kids. And I'll never forget the first time you fly in combat. I mean, it's such a big deal. You spend years training to go do something with your F-18, you know? So I remember just being super just pumped up and excited and nervous and butterflies. And the training is so good that, you know, your hands are doing things that your brain is kind of like a step behind, and the training takes over, and you kind of get over those humps, and you find yourself launching off the carrier to join up with your wingman and fly into hostile territory for the first time. And it's an amazing feeling. But we would join up together, and these flights were anywhere from 5 to 8 hours long. So they're pretty long flights.
And is that because you start from pretty far away from, Phil would call it an area of operation? But
no, that's right. Yeah, we're starting down in the North Arabian Sea. We've got an hour and a half transit just to get into Afghanistan. And then once we're there, the way it works is you kind of get your tasking. So you'd fly through Pakistan as a flight of two, so two F-18s kind of side by side. And the first thing you do is go hit a big Air Force tanker, big wing tanker. You'd go find them wherever they are. They could be probably roughly within about 100 miles from getting into Afghanistan. And you'd basically run an air-to-air intercept on the tanker. You'd join on them. You'd get your gas. And hitting tankers over Afghanistan, at least, was kind of like social hour. It could have been like a Dutch tanker, a British tanker.
Oh, it's not necessarily U.S.?
No, yeah, there was coalition forces. Most of them were U.S., but I remember hitting some British and French tankers, and that was always fun because you're kind of shooting the shit with the foreigners.
Oi! I've got me aviation fuel! Now, is this like trying to plug an iPhone into a British socket? Do you guys have to have like 36 adapters?
No, the tanker will have done that adapting on land, and they will be assigned to fighter jets or any jets based on what adapter they have that day. So, yeah, I mean, that is an issue, but it's all kind of sorted out. Everything is very controlled and assigned, at least in this sustained kind of operations that I was flying in Afghanistan. I would imagine if the flag went up and there was some new operation going down, we'd have to figure all that kind of stuff out, and it'd be more of a shit show.
And so Pakistan knew you were flying over their territory, right?
They did, and it was kind of like they allowed us to do it, but we had to stay within a certain couple miles from what we called the boulevard. We couldn't deviate from the known flight path.
They're super friendly to us.
Well, it's funny because when Obama greenlit the order to go get bin Laden, they didn't tell anyone. They didn't tell Pakistan.
No, because that's like a cheesecloth of information that's just flowing right on through.
I mean, I always find our relationship with Pakistan to be very interesting. And
Okay, so you're flying out on your mission. The first few hours, you say it takes a number of hours to get there. Is it very business as usual, or are you relaxed and chatting a little bit? What happens there?
Yeah, great question. In the first few missions, it was kind of business as usual, but you were kind of like testing all your systems. You're turning on your targeting pod, making sure the video quality is good that day, kind of checking out the GPS. Has it downloaded to the GPS guided bombs? Is everything good there? So you're kind of going through weapons checks preemptively just to make sure everything's good to go. By the 30th mission, you were like shooting the shit, asking how the kids are and stuff like that.
With the ordnance, how much are you putting into it? So do you have to steer it? Does someone else steer it?
Normally we were flying with GPS guided bombs. We would basically, if we were going to drop those, we would be past the coordinates from somebody on the ground. We would enter them into the system, which would then be downloaded into the bomb, and we would obviously triple check them, go through our checklist. So that's the GPS guided bomb. And then the jet kind of gives you hey, steer to this area, and you can release the weapon in this area, and theoretically it will hit the target. So those are the GPS guided bombs. There are also laser guided bombs, which are a dumb bomb, but with a laser seeker head on it, and you can basically laze the target, and the bomb will pick up your laser energy and guide to the target on that laser energy.
So if you weren't releasing bombs in your mission, what was kind of the purpose of your mission? To be there in case you were needed in a specific area, or what?
Yeah, so we would hit the tanker, and then we would go check in with somebody on the ground, and that, hey, this is us. We're two F-18s. We've got these weapons on board, and we have our targeting pods. Basically, what do you need? And we were kind of eyes in the sky for them. They'd say, hey, watch these buildings. Let us know what you see. Sometimes you'd check in with somebody on the ground, and you would hear their blood pressure was up. They're basically yelling on the radio, and you knew it was a little bit different of a mission, and you had to get there immediately. They would say, "Hey, we're taking enemy fire. We don't exactly know the coordinate, but here's a rough coordinate, and requesting a show of force east to west immediately," or something like that. So we would kind of clear the airspace, and we'd come in for a show of force. What that meant was we'd descend from 20,000 feet down to the surface, talking 200 feet, and go as fast as possible over that enemy site as a flight of 2 or maybe just a single aircraft, and try to stop or deter the enemy from shooting. And it always worked from what I was told. Yeah, and that,
it was scared the living daylights out of me.
Yeah,
They have big bombs. They're real loud and real fast.
Yeah.
Yeah, and often we'd kick out flares, which are those bright flares right out of the underside of the jet, right over the site, just as an intimidation factor, just to get them to stop firing at our guys so they can do whatever they need to do on the ground.
Yeah.
Ben, you're an educated guy. You know some stuff. You've been around. Does lightning make a sound?
I'm Googling 1 second.
The answer is
no.
No, lightning does not make a sound. So what is thunder then?
thunder is the sound that lightning makes. We've established this. And now I will play, and Ben, I apologize that you cannot hear our amazing sound effects. I will play my wonderfully long, totally self-indulgent intro to Connor's lightning
Ben,
round.
I'm going to narrate it for you so you can hear.
Welcome to the lightning round.
You don't have to answer that question.
I'll answer the question.
I believe that you can hear lightning.
I don't really give a good fuck what you know or don't know, but I'm going to torture you anyway.
Launching in 3, 2, 1.
I'm at a soundbite and it's like 30 seconds too long.
I purposely made that long so it would annoy you every time I played it.
Long. We lose so many viewers during your sound bites. All right, Ben, we do a thing on the show. It's called the lightning round. I am going to fire questions at you, and all I ask is that you respond as quickly as possible.
Let's do it.
All right. What is your call sign?
X-Lax.
Oh my God, I have to. All right. See, this is what always happens. I always want to do the lightning, and then I get sidetracked. Why is it X-Lax?
What is the story behind X-Lax?
Basically, they give you like a BS call sign for a while. It's probably FNG, which stands for fucking new guy. And then over time, you're going to do something stupid, or so they think. They think you're going to either, get drunk and do something stupid, get a call sign, or you'll do something airborne and get a call sign. Well, we were deployed. We were on the ship when I joined the squadron, and I just didn't have a call sign after, 4 or 5 months. I was still FNG, fucking new guy. And now what I will say is that the ship onboarded some really bad lettuce off the coast. And also I did play lacrosse, so they thought it'd be funny. X-Lax, X-Lacrosse.
I see what they did there.
Yeah. Call sign is pretty funny in the Navy. They give you a call sign in the Navy to make fun of you, whereas in the Air Force, it's like snake and viper. In the Air Force.
See, I would go Air Force.
I want Air Force. Although John said that my call sign would be itchy because of all my skin disorders. So this actually leads in well to my next question. What were the best and worst call signs among the guys you served with?
One of my buddies that I knew all the way back to the Naval Academy, played lacrosse with him, great guy. He's just sometimes kind of a little bland, so they gave him the call sign Tofu, white and bland. and if you get to know him, it's like that's a perfect call sign. Well, that one didn't last too long for whatever reason. They then changed it to Gray Wolf because on a training trip out to Fallon, Nevada, you go hang out in South Lake Tahoe, and I guess Gray Wolf is the only known predator of the cougar, which is very good for him.
He bagged an older gal.
I think so.
Oh.
Yeah. So one time, we were out in Nevada again. Funny, a lot of things happen in Nevada. So we had a buddy, he was single at the time, and he's like, guys, I met a great girl in Reno over the weekend. Really good girl. It comes out that, she's got a couple kids, which is fine. The baby's daddy is in jail, and we gave him the call sign Southwest because the baggage flies free.
Oh.
We thought that was a good one.
That is, Southwest is strong.
You Navy boys are clever.
I like that.
Can you handle the truth?
Yes.
Let's cut that one.
I knew that was a bomb. I would have shut that one down beforehand.
Yeah, never mind. Sorry.
No, it wasn't your fault. It was Connor's.
Sorry. You know what, John? You really shouldn't be criticizing anybody right now because we're 3 hours into a 20-minute interview.
You've got me there.
Yeah. What happens if you need to take a leak on a mission?
You just go, man. You just go. You ever seen Dumb and Dumber?
Yeah, I have. But do you wear diapers?
No. So they give you basically it's like a clever Ziploc bag, and it's got like some sand grit material that's going to absorb your urine. So what you have to do, it's a pretty complicated process. I guess this is why you asked. But yeah, so you dim a display down to dark, meaning you've done something in your jet because you're about to safe the ejection seat. So you dim the display down to dark, you safe the ejection seat. You're probably on autopilot, hopefully at this point. And now you loosen up your lap belts, you unzip your fly, and you go ahead and urinate in this bag that has the absorbent material. You hope you don't piss all over yourself, but you probably do until you're like your 30th time doing it.
As you get older, you probably leave a little bit in the chamber too.
Yeah, you seal the bag, put it back, and that's about it. You put it in your helmet bag and then hope it doesn't explode on the track.
Now, is there somebody whose job it is to remove the urine sacs from the aircraft, or is that a pilot's duty?
Well, that is the pilot's duty. They frown on you asking somebody to do that. And then we would all try to throw them, damn Navy people and their environmentals. They'd throw them into the water, but the Navy is smart. So the big captain of the ship would get really mad at us. And if you threw your piss bag into the water when you got done with a flight, you were probably going to see the captain of the ship. So
wow. Where is the plaque for second best?
In the ladies' room.
Yes, it is. Have you ever been inverted?
Last night.
Oh!
Wild card, bitches! Yeah!
Do you ever secretly hope that the pilot on your commercial flight eats some bad fish and that the co-pilot is actually just an inflatable Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and they come on the PA and say, "Can anybody land this plane?"
Dude, every single flight. Thank you for asking.
Do you walk around like, "Someone please create a reason so that I can tell everyone around me that I am a fighter jet pilot"?
Excuse me, ma'am. Excuse me. I'm a fighter pilot.
Consciously, no. Subconsciously, of course.
God, I would tell everyone. I would be so intolerably obnoxious.
Dude, I did like 2 hours of ground training for a C-172, like a little Honda Civic with wings.
Yes.
And I used to get on commercial flights and be like, "I think I got this. Like if things go south, I think I got this. Don't worry, guys."
Does your wife vomit if she hears you've lost that loving feeling?
Oh my God, yes, she does. Her dad plays it though every time.
That is such a dad move.
Yeah.
That is such a dad joke. Like every year, the same joke. He walks in for Thanksgiving and he plays "You've Lost That Loving Feeling." You're like, okay.
Yeah.
Did a lot of your peers become commercial pilots?
Yeah, actually, a lot of them are right now because it's probably the best time to go to the commercial aviation since, I don't know, maybe the 90s. But yeah, they have, and they are right now.
You chose to be a dentist instead. Do you know that they have the highest rate of suicide of any profession?
Wait, they do?
Yes.
Oh, God.
You may have chosen the only job more dangerous than being in the military.
Are you worried about job security with all the drones being rolled out? Do we still need a person in the plane?
We used to say that fighter pilots are like the samurai. It's a dying art form. So I am worried about it, but I think it's a long way off.
If you were ever to appear on a podcast and you did an hour of interview only to find out that the podcast host had not pressed record, which part of him would you like to kick?
Calf.
Oh, that's mean.
I was thinking shin. So
he is smarter than us because that's going to cause one of those obnoxious like hematomas in the calf that makes it all feel pulled for like a week. It's going to be super tight and you go to step and you're going to re-pull it every day for a week.
You know what's a good one is the Achilles heel. Just kick him right in the Achilles heel while he's standing up. So there's a bunch of torsion on it.
Yep.
And just kick him until he buckles.
Mid quad, another good place to get a knot that won't go away for a month.
I think the point is what we can all agree on is that John deserves many kicks in various places.
Okay, so Ben, thank you so much for being with us and tolerating my amazing inadequacies. Kind of one last question. On your Facebook page is one of the coolest photos I have ever seen. It is a jet. I don't know if you're in it or you're taking the photo over Manhattan. What other cool stuff have you done in a jet that has nothing to do with any reasonable military purpose?
Yeah, that was my last flight ever in the F-18. I was able to go up and do a little tour of the, I guess it was the Hudson River, and yeah, I got that great picture.
That's awesome.
It's the coolest picture.
We'll put it on our site.
Yeah, we used to go out over the ocean, and you had a little extra gas. I mean, you kind of just point your cans towards Virginia and just go, as fast as you can for no reason, good reason at all, just to see how fast you're going. That was always kind of a good day. But I have to say probably the best thing was something that you learn early in your career when you're maybe out there on your own. You've got really not much of a mission that day, but you need to be flying just to get some proficiency, is cloud surfing. Looking for little holes to shoot through and do an aileron through, and then go, vertical and invert it over the top. And those days were like, this is by far the best job in the world.
His life is so cool.
Sometimes I ride my hoverboard around the little reflectors that are glued to the pavement.
Totally the same thing.
Well, now all I can do is drive to Baltimore for dental school. And when I see those clouds, be like, I wish I was cloud surfing right now.
Yeah, that's true. That's got to be like getting off smack. You just spend the rest of your life chasing the dragon.
Chasing that high, yeah.
Well, Ben, on that note, that is one of the coolest, most badass life stories that I have heard in a long time. I did my personal best to completely shit-can the entire interview, but thank you for sticking around and bearing with us, because I learned many, many important things. I learned that even when you're a badass pilot, bad lettuce is still your weak point, that anyone that has ever landed on an aircraft carrier is a million times more badass than we will ever be. Mm-hmm. And then lastly, I believe that he insulted Captain Phil, and there was a shot across the bow.
There were shots.
And we need to go back to Captain Phil for a retort.
We got to bring them both on.
Ben, thank you again for joining us. I know that everyone is going to love this interview, and I will end by shooting myself.
Thank you, Jets. It was an honor to be here. I appreciate it.
We might need to have you on again in case John forgot to turn the mic on.
Definitely too soon. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for listening to Wildcard. See live podcasts and pics from the show on Instagram and Facebook, or visit us online at wildcardshow.com.